I lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling of my bedroom while the low rumble of a bass speaker vibrated through the floorboards. Next door, my brother-in-law was celebrating another meaningless victory, his laughter booming across the property line like he owned the entire block. They thought I was just a quiet widow running a desk job at the Department of Defense, a weak woman they could push around and humiliate whenever they pleased. They had no idea that behind my quiet life sat a decade of military service, classified operations, and combat training designed to neutralize threats without making a sound. For months I had stayed silent to protect my daughter, but as I listened to the thump of his heavy bag against our fence, I knew the peace was over, and the empire they built on arrogance was about to crumble. 10 years in military service teaches you how to read people long before they make a move. I earned my rank through deployments in hostile territory where survival meant noticing the smallest shift in the air, and my final title was Major in Special Operations as a lead security assessor. My job was simple: identify the threat, assess the risk, and eliminate the danger with absolute precision. When I finally left that life behind, I locked my medals in a safe in the basement and buried my operational history behind a wall of high-level government clearance. To my family, my neighbors, and my sister, I was just a low-level administrative clerk pushing paperwork in a windowless basement office, earning a modest salary and living a quiet life in the Virginia suburbs. I wanted it that way because my only real mission left was raising my 11-year-old daughter, Chloe, in complete peace. Our routine was simple and peaceful for 4 months until the estate next door was bought by Richard Vance, a wealthy logistics tycoon who believed money made him untouchable. Richard was the kind of man who measured every human being by their bank account and treated everyone around him like hired help. His son, Brock, moved in with him, bringing along my sister, Sarah, who had married Brock 2 years earlier for his family fortune. Brock was 24 years old, 230 pounds of heavy muscle, and completely convinced that his physical size was a valid argument in every conversation. The moment they arrived, Brock chained a heavy punching bag to a post directly against our shared fence, sending loud, rhythmic vibrations through my kitchen walls every single afternoon while I quietly evaluated his poor balance and open guard from my window. It did not take long for the family to show their true colors. My sister Sarah walked into my home unannounced one afternoon, placing her designer bag on my table and spending 20 minutes bragging about her new marble countertops and custom renovations. She looked at my simple laminate counters, my second-hand curtains, and my daughter's drawings on the fridge with pure pity, telling me I could have so much more if I just tried harder in life. I kept my breathing steady, held my heart rate low, and said nothing as she left her shallow insults hanging in the air. Meanwhile, Brock started acting like he owned the entire neighborhood, forcing elderly neighbors off the sidewalk, blocking storm drains with his gym gear, and treating everyone around him like background noise in his personal world. The tension finally boiled over on a hot afternoon in July while Chloe was out in the driveway washing my car with a hose. She had the radio playing softly through the open window, minding her own business, when Brock came lumbering across the property line shirtless and sweating. Without saying a word to my frightened daughter, he reached through the window and twisted the radio knob so hard the plastic assembly snapped off the dashboard. He tossed the broken piece onto the wet concrete and growled at Chloe to turn off her garbage music before strutting away. Chloe shrank against the car door in tears, too terrified to speak, completely shaken by a grown man who had just destroyed her property simply because he felt like it. I saw the whole thing from the kitchen window, and my internal threat assessment went from green to red in less than a second. I walked down the driveway with a calm, unhurried posture, keeping my weight balanced and my hands loose at my sides. I stopped 4 feet from Brock, looked him dead in the eye, and told him in a flat, emotionless voice that he had crossed a line and would never touch my property or speak to my daughter again. Brock just laughed, puffing out his chest to tower over me, telling me I was just a washed-up woman living off a pathetic government paycheck who could do nothing to stop him. I did not escalate the situation. I gave him a clear path to walk away, which was standard protocol, but I knew in that moment he had placed himself directly on my active target list. By August, the situation reached its absolute limit when Richard threw a massive backyard party to celebrate Brock winning a local amateur fighting tournament. Brock set up his gear right at the fence line, throwing aggressive kicks and punches to show off in front of Chloe and her middle school friends who were sitting at our picnic table trying to study. His kicks snapped the branches of my prized lilac bushes, sending leaves and wood flying onto our grass while he smirked at the young girls. When Chloe texted me that they were scared, I stepped outside and calmly told Brock to take his circus somewhere else. Enraged at being corrected, Brock charged across the property line, grabbed me by the collar, and threatened to break my neck right there on the grass. In less than a second, my military training took over completely. I pivoted my hips to kill his forward momentum, locked his wrist, and drove my thumb directly into the nerve cluster on his forearm while lifting his elbow joint past its natural extension point. The textbook nerve disruption sent Brock dropping straight into the grass, gasping for air as his right arm went completely numb and useless. I immediately took 2 steps back, put on a look of total panic, and loudly asked if he had tripped on a tree root so the audience at the party would think he simply fell. Brock scrambled back to his feet in pure embarrassment, cradling his useless arm and glaring at me with utter confusion before retreating to his side of the yard. An hour later, the backyard gate swung open, and Richard walked onto my lawn alongside Brock, who was now wearing a pair of heavy MMA gloves. Richard offered a nasty sneer, telling me that his money was the law in this town and demanding that I put on a pair of gloves so his son could teach me a proper lesson in front of my daughter. They genuinely believed that cornering an administrative clerk was a display of absolute dominance, having no idea who I actually was or what I was capable of doing. I stood motionless on the grass, looking at the men who thought they could bully us, and realized that hiding my past was no longer an option if I wanted to protect my daughter's safety. Instead of backing down, I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and dialed a direct line to a high-ranking official at the Department of Defense who owed his career to my previous operational work. I spoke clearly into the speakerphone, using my real title and authority, requesting an immediate commercial and financial audit on Richard Vance's logistics company for suspicious cross-border freight movements. Richard's face drained of color as the voice on the other end recognized my rank without hesitation and confirmed that federal agents and transport inspectors were already being dispatched to his main distribution center. The arrogant smile vanished from his face instantly as he realized the woman he had been mocking was connected to the highest levels of military authority. Within 2 weeks, the collapse of their empire was complete and unyielding. Federal inspectors uncovered years of tax fraud, safety violations, and illegal freight operations that crippled Richard's business overnight, forcing him to liquidate his assets just to cover his impending legal fees. The massive estate next door was put up for sale at a fraction of its value, and my sister Sarah was left staring at a mountain of debt as her dream of luxury evaporated into thin air. Brock never hit a heavy bag again, avoiding my gaze whenever he had to pack up his truck, terrified of the quiet neighbor he had tried so hard to intimidate. Standing on my porch on a quiet September morning, I watched the moving trucks finally drive away from the empty house next door. Chloe was back in the yard, laughing as she chased a cat through the grass, her world once again safe, secure, and peaceful. I took a sip of my black coffee and looked down at the plain wooden fence separating our properties, knowing that true strength never needs to shout or throw its weight around. The people who rely on noise and cruelty to build their power will always fall apart the moment they meet someone who truly knows how to stand their ground.